example, for argument, to be calling, I won't even mention the names that she used, but it was a very foul word that she used to call Donald Trump a name. Okay. And
let's go to Ray. Connecticut says he doesn't believe the president. Hi, Ray. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for taking my call. I'm a first-time caller, a long-time listener, and it's programs like C-SPAN, and your coverage that really is getting to the heart of why we watch. I'll just say that. I actually wanted to take a little different tack. I did want to comment, though, on Henry from South Carolina in his clear and concise comments, and I thought they were spot on. And I said I wanted to take a little different tack here, and I think that President Obama should take a play from Trump's playbook and sue him for libel and defamation. I think that would be something that it's in keeping with his profile as a person, Trump's, that is. And finally, I'd like to just say that I believe that President Trump is clearly the least intellectual, or I should say the most intellectually challenged president that we've ever had. And I really, you could listen to a lot of his callers, the ones who are calling in for him, and you can clearly, I will just say that most of them probably haven't achieved an 8th grade reading level, much like President Trump himself.
We'll move next to James. Port Orchard, Washington says he's not sure. Good morning.
Yes, I'm not sure. I listen, and I try to discern. I listen to both sides, and I hear those who call Trump a pathological liar. I don't know if they even know what the dictionary definition of a pathological liar is. I think maybe they parrot what somebody else said. So everybody begins to jump on the bandwagon and say pathological liar when they don't even know the definition of it. But then on the other side, I can see people who believe everything. They're wanting to believe so much because there's such a desire for hope to save this country, as myself too, being 74 years old. I want to believe that he's telling the truth. Sometimes I can hear statements of maybe exaggeration or uncertainty, so I just try to listen to all of it, and then come to a conclusion. But I believe we have to give the man a chance. I gave Obama a chance. I gave Bush a chance. I voted all three ways, independent. I voted Republican, but I voted Democrat because I had the hopes to see this country being revived again. Now, some of these big terms we hear, like Make America Great Again, I think people are hoping for that. And so that term came out of that thinking. So I think we have to really give him a chance, and listen to him. I mean, it's only been a couple months, so let's don't type him a pathological liar in that short period of time. Give him some time. Give him some space, Let him produce. If he's going to produce, then let's see if we call him a pathological liar. If he doesn't produce, okay, then do it. Meanwhile, why don't we just observe and be an American citizen, and don't look at black, and don't look at white, and don't look at Hispanic. Give the man a chance. He is our president. Thank God. I believe he's going to do some good. I sent him a couple bucks, to help out. And so my heart is with him. I hope he'll do good.
Gotcha, James. The front page of the Washington Post, it's the below-the-fold story taking a look at actions going on in Syria and extra U.S. troops to those actions, saying that the military's drawn up early plans that would deploy up to 1,000 more troops into northern Syria in the coming weeks, expanding the American presence in the country ahead of the offense of the Islamic State's de facto capital of Raqqa. That's according to U.S. defense officials familiar with the matter. The deployment, if it's approved by the Defense Secretary James Mattis and President Trump, would potentially double the number of U.S. troops in Syria and increase the potential for direct U.S. combat involvement in a conflict that has been characterized by confusion and competing priorities among disparate forces. The president, who charged President Barack Obama with being weak on Syria, gave the Pentagon 30 days to prepare a new counter-Islamic State plan, and Secretary Mattis submitted a broad outline to the White House at the end of February. Kim from Ottumwa, Iowa, you're next. Calling on a line for those who don't believe the president in this matter of wiretapping. Go ahead.
No, I don't believe him. Trump has been consistent on, I'm going to put it as, instead of pathological liar, a fibber. And Obama did a great job. He's not our president no more. Trump is our president, so I don't understand why that he has to come to the American people and fib all the time. It's ridiculous. He needs to grow up as our president and tell people the truth, but we don't know what is the truth. And with the mainstream media, I enjoy it. I watch MSNBC. I watch you guys on C-SPAN, and I also watch CNN, and they are telling the truth. Fox, I don't care because they have some conservative reporters started to do the alternative facts, too. So to all the callers and all the voters that voted for Trump, he's trying to put everyone in a senile stage. And he broke every law. I don't see how he's still our president. All the laws he have broken and dealing with Russia, now he's dealing with Iran deal, old banks money in China. And it's not right. If one of us citizens had did all those things, we would have been already locked up.
Gotcha. Kim from Iowa. Again, a lot of things happening, even in the last 24 hours news-wise. On Capitol Hill, constant discussions between Republicans amongst themselves about the GOP replacement plan for the Affordable Care Act. Some of those discussions taking place in forms of hearings, including the House Budget Committee today. One of those places where there have been questions on whether it would survive the committee, according to some reporting, but then you can see it play out for yourself. That's going to be at 10 o'clock this morning. You can watch it on C-SPAN 2, this markup of the budget by the House, or the health care plan by the House Budget Committee. C-SPAN 2 is where you watch it, cspan.org, also our C-SPAN radio app. Wendell from Michigan says he believes the president. Tell us why. Wendell from Michigan, hello. Let's go to Ray. Ray is in Stafford, Virginia, says he doesn't believe the president. Good morning.
Good morning. We're setting a precedent here that's amazing. We talk about this here in America, but when do we accuse someone without any evidence at all? Imagine if this was just a regular civilian that Trump was accusing. We're spending all this money, no evidence whatsoever anywhere so far, and no one even looks at the legality of this stuff. I mean, he is setting a precedent here that is just amazing. I'm sure there are laws against accusing someone and not providing any evidence. And furthermore, you state that you have the evidence, and then you turn around and you say, oh, well, wait 2 weeks. Well, hasn't it been about 2.5 weeks already? And we still have no information on whether President Obama did this or not. And, people get mad because you call him a liar, but, I mean, even when he was running during his campaign, he stated, he has this big old plan on how to defeat ISIS, and he's going to defeat them real quickly. And he won't share that plan because he doesn't want no one to steal it or anything. And then all of a sudden, just a couple of weeks ago, I have asked my top generals to, come up with a plan. I mean, this guy has constantly shown that, he can't be trusted. And to follow him blindly without questioning anything he does, to me, it's just ridiculous. It's crazy.
Okay, let's go next to Ozzy. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania says he is not sure. Go ahead, Ozzy.
I'm not sure that Donald Trump is capable of telling the truth, and he is preeminently unqualified to be president of the United States of America. His entourage, for a few Russian rubles, have sold the American people down the river. They coined Carter Page, Flynn, for a few Russian rubles. They have been acting in concert, which is a nice way of saying treason, with the Russians since prior to this election. And it will be manifested in these hearings that will start on the 20th of this month. They have all acted in concert with the Russians, with the greater interest of Russia, not America, for a few Russian rubles. Sir, they have committed treason. It is punishable by penalty of death or imprisonment, and it will be manifested itself. I've called you. This is my third and last call for the year. And sir.
Okay. Joe, Bath, Pennsylvania, says he believes the president. You're next.
Good morning. The truth is Obama's a liar. He was against cops. He let people out of Guantanamo Bay. This man took executive orders and he lied about the health care. Come on, people.
So why do you believe President Trump about his claims?
Well, why would I believe Obama about the Russians? He tried to rig it up to say, oh, the Russians did it. The Russians put him in. Who's the real liar here? Obama destroyed the country, destroyed it. Never mind help the country. Just the executive orders alone took jobs out of this country. Look at all the cops that were getting killed. Come on, give me a break.
Cassandra, Grand Junction, Colorado, on our line for those who don't believe the president. Go ahead. Cassandra from Colorado. Hi there. Okay, I think we're having a connection problem with that. Let's go next to Max, Chesapeake, Virginia, for those who believe the president. Hello, Max.
Hello. I actually called on the line that I do not believe the president because for the simple fact that he made the claim, but you've also got counterclaims by the DNI, who would have known, by the Gang of Eight, who would have known, by the FBI director. And so by sheer numbers, you've got a number of counterclaims of credible people who are in the public trust, who have long records of telling the truth and public service, and I believe them.
Brian is next. He's in Bel Air, Maryland. Brian, good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Yes, I do believe President Trump. The Obama administration's been dirty from the get-go, been underhanded, and did a lot of bad deals. The Iranian deal, as the other caller brought up, released prisoners from Guantanamo Bay. That's the people that want to kill Americans and hurt this country.
So why does that leave you to believe President Trump then when he says he was wiretapped?
Well, when you have Loretta Lynch, head of the Department of Justice, doing meet and greets on the airfield, that screams it. That's just like the proof of the administration of how they were. And on top of it, I get tired and take it personal of constantly that people don't know me, get on the air and accuse me of different things, and the one caller that we're not educated or smart enough to know better, which is totally false. And I get so sick of hearing that narrative. It's all they go for. The Democratic Party is a character assassination, and if that don't work, then they'll start screaming racism, which is totally untrue.
That's Brian, Bel Air, Maryland, calling on these claims by the president that he was wiretapped by the previous administration. Two guests joining us this morning, two members of Congress. Our conversations will start today with the freshman Republican Tom Garrett. He's from Virginia, to talk about health care, the status of the bill by the Republicans, other topics there as well. Similar conversations will take place with Mark Pocan of Wisconsin, the Democrat from there, also the Democratic Caucus senior whip. Those coming up when Washington Journal continues.
This weekend on American History TV on C-SPAN 3. Saturday night at 10 Eastern on Real America. We look back 30 years to 1987 and the confirmation hearings for Judge Robert Bork, nominee to the Supreme Court by President Ronald Reagan.
Judge Bork is wrong on civil rights, wrong on equal rights for women, wrong on the right to privacy, wrong on freedom of speech. And President Reagan is wrong to try to put him on the Supreme Court.
Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern on American Artifacts. We'll visit the National World War I Museum and Memorial in Kansas City, Missouri.
When the museum was being constructed, the city leaders and congressional leaders went to the U.S. Congress and asked for this to be designated as the National Museum. And because of the scope of the collection, its significance in the amongst other museums in the world, Congress designated in 2004 the museum as the National Museum.
And at 6:30, historian Catherine Clinton, author of the book Harriet Tubman, The Road to Freedom.
Following her retirement from the Army in 1865, Tubman returned to her home in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, where she settled into the role of activist, philanthropist. She solicited funds for Freedmen's Aid and veterans' benefits. She remained active in women's suffrage and other important reform crusades.
For our complete American History TV schedule, go to cspan.org.
Sunday night on Afterwards, biochemist Sylvia Tara looks at the history and science behind body fat in her book, The Secret Life of Fat. She's interviewed by Gina Colada, medical reporter for the New York Times.
You told us there's a set point. Your brain sets what your weight is. What, is it changing as you get older? What happens to it?
Yeah, so as we age, it's almost a force of nature that we seem to accumulate more fat, at least a great many of us. And, as we age, we lose hormones. We lose a lot of fat-busting hormones that we've had. They decline with age. So things like growth hormone, that helped us rebuild tissue and helped us grow and kept our fat metabolizing, that declines with age. Testosterone levels decline with age, and that's a great fat-busting hormone. And both women and men, we both have less of it as we age. And this, so you can't really eat what you did when you were 22. That big plate of food, it's going to make you fat as you get older. Yeah. And it's not just the level of fat, it's the distribution of it that's affected as well.
Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern on Afterwards.
Washington Journal continues.
Our first guest of the morning, Representative Tom Garrett, Republican of Virginia, a member of the Foreign Affairs and Homeland Security Committees, also a member of the Freedom Caucus. Good morning to you.
Good morning, and also a member of the Education and Workforce Committees.
And on top of those things, a freshman, tell us a little bit about how you got here, really quick, like your elevator pitch as far as, so to speak.
Well, the reason I'm on 3 committees instead of 2 or 1 is because we begged on. Really and truly just trying to find the best opportunity we can find to give back with whatever talent and opportunities expose themselves. So, I'm just happy to be here and have the opportunity to serve in James Madison's seat.
And a little bit about your background?
So, military veteran, served in Operation Joint Guard, Joint Endeavor. After that, went to law school, served as a prosecutor, state, federal, local, just under 10 years.
And so, according to the Washington Post even this morning, one of the things now you're encountering is the repeal and replacement bill from the Republicans. The Washington Post saying you're one of several Republicans from Virginia who still have questions about this.
Sure. At least 4 off the top of my head. Look, there's some good things in the bill. The fact that we can drop the deficit by $1/3 of $1 trillion in 10 years is great. The fact that we're starting to expand opportunities towards HSAs is great. That encourages good behavior. 2 reservations that I have specifically are the fact that we're sort of rewarding bad behavior as it relates to Medicaid expansion and penalizing the 19 states who stood firm and sort of stood up for fiscal discipline and restraint. You reward bad behavior, you get more of it. The second thing is that the way the tax credits are structured, arguably this would be the largest entitlement program ever passed under a Republican president, Republican Congress. Our GDP does not equal our national debt right now, and so we need to be looking at long-term sustainability as it relates to spending habits, and this isn't that. So, look, we criticized Speaker Pelosi and said, how can you say pass the bill to find out what's in it? Right now, the timeline we're on has us doing the exact same thing. The goal here isn't to get this done. The goal is to get this done right. And I think that's what the folks who are putting on the brakes a little bit are saying.
We heard President Trump say it, as well as the House Speaker, saying that changes can be made and could be tailored to satisfy people who are skeptical or at least concerned. Do you think that might happen?
Oh, I'm sure it will happen. And we're getting particularly good messages from the White House. Again, I think President Trump is trying to ensure that the changes that we make are good changes that drive towards affordability, market-based solutions, and allowing individuals freedom of choice while it's not breaking the bank. I've never started a negotiation where your opening position was where you finished, and I think that's where we are right now. This is too important to bowl through and get wrong. If it were all about scoring political points, the easy play for the Republicans would be to let the wheels continue to come off of the Obamacare disaster. That's not what we want to do here. We want to get this done right. We want to see the cost curve bend down, and we want to see it done in a way that's fiscally sustainable, and I think that's what we're working towards.
So specifically, then what do you have to see in order to get your support?
Well, I want to see something that doesn't reward the states that rushed for more federal largesse, those Medicaid expansion states, and I want to see something that's not done in the form of an entitlement, but instead incenting good behavior. We can't treat healthcare like a pure marketplace because healthcare is not sneakers. It's a need, not a want. But to the extent that we can let the market work, we need to do that. We need to allow, for example, small groups of individuals to band together to create numbers. We've actually passed a bill. This is standalone. This is the Small Business Healthcare Accessibility Act that came out of Ed and Workforce last week. There's a bill to repeal the McCarran-Ferguson antitrust exception for health insurance providers. That's a good move towards allowing competition across state lines. These sorts of things will drive prices down. We know that. Our office has a bill specifically to cover the high-risk and pre-existing condition pool. We want to cover them. How do you do that? And so these are the sorts of things that we need to think outside the box on because they're priorities not just for Republicans but for America. And sometimes those sorts of solutions take a little bit of time.
Representative Tom Garrett, Republican from Virginia. You've heard him talk about the committees he's on. Here to talk to you, 202-748-8000 for Democrats. For Republicans, 202-748-8001. And Independents, 202-748-8002. Our first call for you comes from Marysville, Washington. Democrats line. James, you're on with our guest. Go ahead.
Good morning, sir. I just wanted to make a little statement about the Obamacare. It took them 7 years to nibble around the edges and eat and chew like the little rats, you know. Until Rubio came up with and got rid of the risk corridor, everything was doing fine. You do every little nitpicky thing to pick away, just like picking on scabs. But that's typically a Republican, you know, a Federalist is what I call them, a Federalist. But between y'all, you know, there's 400 of you, and you're 1,200 lawyers and 8 years, and you pick and you pick and you pick and you find every little thing you can do. I mean, I see your smiling face. You feel guilty in your heart, don't you?
Okay.
Is that a question?
You can respond as you wish.
No, I don't feel guilty. I feel like I'm doing everything I can do to make it better than I found it. The beauty of America is that you can not know how many members of Congress there are, but get on the phone and call and criticize members of Congress. You know, God bless this man for being engaged in the process. I think that's awesome. We've reached different conclusions with the same information. That's what happens a lot of times.
From Houston, Texas, Republican line. Al, go ahead. You're on with our guest.
Oh, okay. Hi. I'm sorry. I'm not a Republican, but just one quick thing is I'd like to know why the word entitlement keeps being used for health care. It's not entitlement to want good health. Preventative health care is not an entitlement. You know, people are not getting LASIK and cosmetic surgery. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a peace of mind to get health care when you walk into a hospital and not getting treated poorly because you don't have the right card or the right insurance. And it's just ridiculous that the Republicans with Chavez saying it's about an iPhone, and then this other guy, he was talking about in 2009 we had the best health care in the world till Obamacare came around. Well, back in 2009, people were saying, oh, you can always go to the emergency room, and I've actually heard people say that now. But the problem is the emergency room is not health care. Health care is, and you're not going to like this, but it's cradle-to-grave health. It's teaching and promoting public health, preventative health.
Okay, we'll let our guest respond.
No, actually, there's a lot of agreement here. Now, the word entitlement is used based on how the care is delivered. In other words, if you're incenting good behavior and then you're subsidizing it on the back end, it's not an entitlement. If you're giving money on the front end, then it would arguably be an entitlement. But healthcare is absolutely also about preventative healthcare. That's a good way to bend the cost curve down. Ultimately, what we're looking at here is a farce insofar as what the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, does. We talk about affordable care. The paradigm should be coverage, right? As we see deductibles skyrocket, as we see premiums skyrocket, if you need care and you can't pay your deductible, you have coverage, but you don't have care. And so if we don't bend that cost curve down, then you'll have a piece of paper that says you're insured, but you won't have access to care. What we need to do is bend the cost curve down so that people can take advantage of the health care that exists. And so I think he makes some really good points as it relates to what health care is. The word entitlement is applied based on how the delivery system is structured. Do you get something regardless of whether you use it, or do you get something based on what you do so that you may use it? And so it's a cart, horse, cart argument. But I don't think on the overarching premise he's necessarily wrong at all.
Here's Bob, Massachusetts, Independent Line.
Hello. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well, Bob.
All right. Well, what I'd like to say is that our healthcare system, because doctors can charge so much, the motto used to be do no harm. What is the motto now? Leave them nothing? Because, I mean, you can't charge a person an entire year's income for a 5-minute visit. I mean, and the EpiPen, whose unscrupulous idea was it to jack up the price to that amount? I mean, oh, my God, nobody cares. You can get any price you want for a drug. If you make a drug, you can charge a stupid amount and say that it would cost you all this in research, when it doesn't. If you chase this money down to where it ends up, you find out who's making all the cash and how they're making it. So, I mean, you know, answer those questions. I'd be happy to hear you.
I think Bob's spot on. Look, we understand there's a research and development period. There's a cost associated with that. The EpiPen is a wonderful example of costs gone wild. It's really a pox upon both houses. As a freshman member, I'm delighted to say I haven't had a part in a lot of those decisions. We'll be held accountable as time goes by, and we should be. But if you look at things like McCarran-Ferguson, which creates monopolies and oligopolies in healthcare, these are things where if you look at the voting history, it was Republicans and Democrats who I would argue, there's no other explanation than didn't want to lose the support of big healthcare. So when you see the repeal of McCarran-Ferguson, and that was a bill that we were very vocal on early on, that's something that's getting bipartisan support. It was something we championed and took some flack for, and then pointed out that the original two patrons of the bill in 2010 were Democrat Betsy Markey and Democrat Tom Perriello from Charlottesville. We need to turn our backs on corporate interest in money and do what's right to turn that cost curve down. FDA reform, drug approval reform, that EpiPen is a great example. And I think you're seeing a lot of that sort of in the innovative proposals made by Republicans here. What you didn't see it in was the ACA, where President Obama essentially co-opted big insurance by guaranteeing ever increasingly large slices of the pie. That didn't work. It's not going to work. What we need to do is break that paradigm and open the markets up. We'll see costs go down.
There's an analysis piece in the New York Times this morning that takes a look at the ACA. I'll just show you the title, the headline first, saying that Obamacare is ailing but not in a death spiral. The authors add this: growing evidence suggests that the markets are far from collapse because of how the subsidies work. People were generally shielded from this year's higher prices, and enrollment is steady. Several recent analysis argue that this year's increase was a market correction, and that a smoother market would have followed in the years ahead.
If the market keeps correcting like this, we won't have a market, right? Somebody needs to send that editorial to the folks in Arizona, Pinal County, where there'll be no providers in another 6 months, to 1/3 of the counties in America where there's one provider. That's not if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. That's not if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Is it a Krugman piece? Just curious.
No, it's Reed Abelson and Margot Sanger-Katz. It's an analysis piece.
Well, ultimately, it depends upon who's doing the analysis, doesn't it? But, you know, that all sounds well and good in the encapsulated bubble that is the New York Times. When you get out there to Pinal County, Arizona, the reality on the ground is different. And if the market keeps correcting the way it is, we literally will have locality after locality after locality where there are no providers. I was speaking to a doctor the other day who said, we can't get rid of the ACA. We have to keep the ACA. And I queried her as to whether or not she took patients on the ACA, and she said, oh, no, the price reimbursement aren't good enough. We don't take them. And that's hypocrisy writ large. Ultimately, we're going to have to find ways to trim around all the edges to get a good, affordable product to Americans. Right now, there are a lot of people with coverage who can't get care because they can't pay that deductible. That needs to change.
This is Representative Tom Garrett joining us this morning, first freshman, first time on this program. Detroit, Michigan, Democrats line. Carol, go ahead.
My name is Carol Williams, and I am a DRI. I'm a Democrat, Republican, and Independent. And all I want to say is, how can filthy rich people in the White House, how can they even feel the pain of the poor person at the bottom? You can't feel the pain. You know, you don't care because your kids are being taken care of, you're being taken care of, but nobody cares about the person. How can you make decisions about poor people when you're not here? Why don't I was poor one time? That is not the thing. Let everybody have health insurance, please. It's a man I know went to the doctor, hadn't been to the doctor in 15 years. And when they had the ACA, he went to the doctor. He got his teeth cleaned. He just got things done. And guess what? And he felt more better. All I'm saying, all of you are. I don't care, DRI, that's what I am. I'm for whatever is right.
I'm going to adopt Carol's platform. I'm a DIR. No, I think she makes some good points. I do think that the White House tends to attract successful people. I think President Obama's net worth when he entered the White House was about $3.4 million. It was over 12 when he left. It's probably doubled that in the last 2 months. I don't hold that against him. He's a successful, intelligent individual who ran good races and convinced the American public that he knew what was best as a chief executive. Having said that, there is a broad swath of experience, at least across the House, as it relates to socioeconomic background and who got where, how. I think that's how the founders intended it. There are certainly people who've never experienced a day of want in their lives, but there are also others who scratched and clawed for everything that they've gotten, and they're really actually making sacrifices to be here. So I like what Carol says. The question is, as you provide this universal coverage, how do you pay for it in a manner that's long-term sustainable for the nation? Again, the GDP right now is outstripped by our current debt. That means that if every single American and American enterprise were to stop feeding itself, paying its mortgage, putting clothes on its children's backs, and work solely towards paying off the debt, it'd take well over a year to do that. In the meantime, we'd starve, we'd go behind in our mortgage, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we agree on the ends. It's the path to the ends. How do you do it in a sustainable manner? And that's why this isn't easy.
Has the House leadership reached out to you specifically?
Oh, sure.
What's the conversations been like?
I understand what they're trying to do, and maybe it's naivete, and maybe I don't have layers of cynicism heaped on. It is the art of the possible. What can we get done? And God bless them, because I do think we need to change the paradigm in order to have something that's long-term sustainable that serves the American people well. Having said that, I think we can do it better. And so that's the conversation back and forth. It is, we understand where you're coming from. We agree with you in principle. We can't get Plan X or Plan Y out of the Senate. That may well be. But we can control what we send to the Senate. And so that's where the hang-up is. But I don't have anything but respect for the tough job that those folks in leadership have. I came here after telling the voters in the 5th District of Virginia who I was and what I believed in. And I'm sticking to those guns.
Republican line, Ocala, Florida. This is George.
Yeah, how you guys doing? Look, number one, we may not be able to do the impossible, but we certainly did the improbable, building Western civilization. You, sir, seem to be playing in the middle of the field as a typical politician. Either answer something yes or no, or don't answer it at all. Listen, this healthcare thing is a dictate. I don't want to dictate. I'm one of the few progressive victims of progressive taxation. I have a small company. Listen, and this is a good comparison. The women say, don't leave us alone with abortion. It's our body. We'll deal with it. Well, President Obama dictated what we do with our entire body. Everyone, man, woman, and child. My son's Blue Cross Blue Shield tripled. Where's that money going? I don't get it. But socialized medicine, there we go. Our socialized medicine, if you put the VA together, the Medicare, the Medicaid, and every other conceivable grant-sucking activist program, we encompass everything Europe has put together.
Okay.
The leadership will be happy to know I'm playing in the middle of the field.
A couple of things before you leave because of the various committees you serve on. The president's budget out. Large increases potentially for defense, homeland security, but cuts in foreign affairs, right, especially from the State Department. What do you think about that balance?
Look, there's a lot to be said for soft power, but we need to spend that money wisely. I think you can make a good argument that we can pare the foreign affairs budget a little bit and still get the same sorts of things done. I really want to see a shift in paradigm in foreign policy. We should never support any regime change anywhere where the chief executive can't articulate what would happen after the regime change to make it better than before, right? You saw a horrible dictator in Gaddafi deposed, and now we have a worse situation with people being beheaded on the beach. We've seen the same thing across North Africa and the Middle East. Sisi stepping in Egypt probably was the best thing that happened in the United States in 2 decades, and that was dumb luck. Leading from behind has failed. The second part of that foreign policy shift needs to be don't arm or supply people who would turn those very weapons on you or your allies next. And that's why we're joining together with Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii to sponsor the Stop Arming Terrorists bill. We literally need a bill to stop sending U.S. aid to Al-Qaeda, Jabhat al-Nusra, ISIS, in Syria. Now, can somebody explain to me why we were doing that? So there's room to cut there. There are priorities, I think, that need to be had at home. Having said that, the real hang-up I have with President Trump's budget would just be the net increase in spending. We've talked about sustainability a lot. Now, there are 2 ways to spend more. You can generate revenue by taxation, or you can grow the economy. One thing that's very encouraging is the job numbers that we've seen. All the leading, and we've now increased interest rates 2/3 as much in the Trump administration as we did in the previous 9 years. So he's got that going against him. But I think when the media said there's a new normal for President Obama, and we saw 2% growth again and again and again, that we'll get back to that 04, 05, 06, where breaking 4% quarterly GDP growth is not unusual. So there should be some revenue generation. Still, though, we need to be more frugal in how we spend. We
saw a second block of the president's refugee ban. Is this a good effort to continue on by the White House, in your opinion?
Look, if you look at Federal Code Section 1182 sub F, everything he's doing he can do. The argument was there's discriminatory intent by the judge from Hawaii. There has to be a rational basis to overcome that argument. Certainly, I would submit that there is. They say, well, we're going to look at the president's rhetoric when he was on the campaign trail. If that were the standard, then the Affordable Care Act would have failed when President Obama said on the campaign trail, this is not a tax, right? Because Chief Justice Roberts later said, oh, no, it's okay because it's a tax. So if courts were going to hold that standard, then we'd have no ACA, at least not post-Roberts ruling. It's funny to watch the machinations ideologically of a group who thought that one particular thing might be perfectly fine after they'd won an election, who now recoil against it when they've lost. But that's America, and that's human nature, so, it is what it is.
Representative Tom Garrett, he's a Republican from Virginia, serves on the Foreign Affairs, Homeland Security, and other committees, also a member of the Freedom Caucus. Thanks for your time today.
Just taking it right down the middle. Thank you for your time.
Coming up, we're going to get a different perspective, Democratic perspective, from Caucus Senior Whip from Wisconsin, Mark Pocan. He'll join us next. Later on in the program, the Federal Reserve announced an increase in the short-term interest rate. What does it mean for your mortgage and credit card payments? Howard Schneider will later join us in the program. He's from Reuters and will tell us about the rate hike and what it means. Washington Journal continues after this.
This weekend, C-SPAN's City Store, along with the help of our Charter Communications cable partners, will explore the literary scene and history of Wilmington, North Carolina. Saturday, at noon Eastern on Book TV, author Philip Gerard discusses his book, Cape Fear Rising.
And so by 1898, Wilmington was one of the largest cities in North Carolina, and of the 17,000 or so citizens, 2/3 of them were black. So they had achieved an amazing thing in just a little more than a generation after being enslaved and coming out of bondage with not even owning the clothes on their back, literally. They had achieved a status of a middle class. They had achieved some political leadership and power. They had achieved social standing, and they had achieved economic wealth in large degree here.
Then we'll travel to Fort Anderson with author Chris Fonville as he talks about Wilmington's role in the Civil War and what happened at this place from his book, To Forge a Thunderbolt, Fort Anderson and the Battle for Wilmington.
Wilmington's importance was so great that it became known as Lee's Lifeline and eventually the lifeline of the Confederacy.
On Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern on American History TV, visit what remains of Fort Fisher, which was once the largest fort in the Confederacy.
This was the largest amphibious operation undertaken by the United States up until June 6th of 1944, which was the invasion of France.
And toward the missile defenses on the battleship USS North Carolina.
The USS North Carolina is the official memorial to the veterans of North Carolina from World War II. I am just awestruck with what was accomplished in 1940 in terms of technology, training, dedication to the mission. You could say the last war that everybody agreed on.
Watch C-SPAN's Cities Tour of Wilmington, North Carolina, Saturday at noon Eastern on C-SPAN 2's Book TV, and Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. on American History TV on C-SPAN 3, working with our cable affiliates and visiting cities across the country.
Washington Journal continues.
Joining us now, Representative Mark Pocan, Democrat from Wisconsin, Democratic Caucus Senior Whip, also the Congressional Progressive Caucus First Vice Chair. Good morning.
Good morning.
We have the House Budget Committee meeting on the Republican alternative to the Affordable Care Act. Coming from the Appropriations Committee, as you do, what are the questions that need to be asked about its future, particularly on the financial side?
You know, I still wonder why they're even calling it health care, because after the CBO score, clearly this is a bill that cuts taxes on the wealthiest Americans and has a little bit of a side of health care. And we found that 24 million people eventually are going to lose health care access through this bill. Everyone else is going to pay more, especially older Americans. This is a dismal failure. So really, I think this was intended to provide some really big tax cuts for the top 1% and 2%, and they kind of packaged it as a health care proposal. I'd just get to all that. Prove that you're actually going to make the health care situation worse for working Americans across the country, and that what this is really about, which is providing these giant breaks to very few people.
What about then the criticisms of the actual CBO score, and particularly as they're related to Obamacare as far as enrollment? The argument from Republicans is, look, so many were supposed to be enrolled under the CBO. We saw fewer than that.
And that's because there were multiple changes that happened later, including states like Wisconsin, my own state, that decided not to expand Medicare. That's part of why you had less enrollment and why the enrollment numbers were different and some other provisions. So that's a real non sequitur. I mean, it's not a real argument. It's just something that they're putting out there. The bottom line is the CBO is our nonpartisan scoring agency, and they said 24 million people. And then we saw there was a leaked White House memo allegedly saying 26 million people. The bottom line is tens of millions of people are going to lose access to health care under what's supposedly a health care bill. That doesn't make any sense. Only in Washington, only in the Beltway would that make any sense. And to the rest of America, certainly in Wisconsin and the upper Midwest, it makes no sense.
And one of the constant claims from Republicans you'll also hear is that Obamacare currently, as it currently stands, will eventually collapse upon itself. Do you buy that argument?
Well, they're doing everything they can to try to make it collapse on itself. But the bottom line is there are things that you can easily improve that we've been saying all along. And I think one of the things from the risk corridor provisions that were put in by Marco Rubio that really have been detrimental to the other provisions, let's just go in and fix those things. But the bottom line is it is now understood by, I would say, the vast majority of Americans that if you're sick or have a pre-existing condition, you should be able to have access to health care. You should have no lifetime cap on that health care that you need. Women should be paying the same as men. You can stay on your parents' plan until you're 26. These are now things that I think across the board people understand we have to have. But the problem is when the Affordable Care Act, the changes we need to make can improve that. But if you look at what the Republicans are trying to do, they're taking away all the revenue sources so they can't actually provide health care. And in the end, fewer Americans have access to health care. Older Americans are going to pay 5 times more than younger Americans. It's just a terrible plan overall, and I think it's going to fail, and I don't even think it'll make it through the Senate.
Do you think it'll make it through the House Budget Committee?
I think they're going to try to still get it through the House, and if they do this, I got to tell you, I think Paul Ryan's credentials as a policy wonk have just hit the rock bottom price possible, because no one expects this to be a real proposal in the end because it's so bad. If they continue to push these huge cuts on Americans, I guarantee people are calling us about this and they're realizing they're losing their health care. They've got to be getting those calls too. It's a devastating plan for health care.
202-748-8000 for Democrats, 202-748-8001 for Republicans, and 202-748-8002 for independents. Our guest joining us to talk about these issues of health care and other topics as well. You can tweet us questions or comments when you go to C-SPAN WJ. You mentioned the risk corridors as one aspect of fixing. We hear from Democrats all the time, fix things that are wrong. Where could Republicans and Democrats come together as far as fixing things with the original plan?
You know, to me, from when I talk to people who actually run insurance companies who used to provide this, and one company that stepped out for a year because they were having some losses, it's just that actuarial side. If you take away the protections, we knew you were going to have that when you had more sick people signing up. But when more healthy people didn't sign up, like they were thought to be by the way the bill was written, that's one of the easy things you got to do right there. I mean, you have to make sure that actuarially it works. But the bottom line is we realized 20 million people realized they needed health care and signed up for this. And that's the way it should be. You should have access. You shouldn't have to go bankrupt simply because you're sick. So if you took care of the risk corridor problem and a few other things, you can make a plan that does everything else that I said. Make sure that if you have a pre-existing condition, you have access to health care. Making sure that women are paying the same as men. Making sure that there's not a lifetime cap. So what you really have now is health insurance. I would argue previously we had profit insurance for health insurance companies, but you didn't actually have access to the care you needed for your family. And now we have that. So why throw that out in order to just give giant tax cuts to, quite honestly, the wealthiest in this country, the people who happen to fund a lot of Republican campaigns?
First call for you comes from Don. Don's in Golden Valley, Arizona, Democrats line. Go ahead.
Yeah, my mother recently went into a long-term care facility in Ohio, and they take her whole Social Security check, and plus she gets help from the Medicaid program. Now, I'm in Arizona, and I'm in my late 60s, and my wife has dementia, and there's no way I could care for my mother. And if they cut back on this Medicaid, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm totally against this thing, and that's my comment.
I hear you, Don, and I'll tell you, I think that's the feeling across the country. You know, Medicaid is one of those safety nets for folks to make sure that we've got health insurance for those who need it the most, who don't have the ability to be able to afford it. And if you cut back on that significantly, you're going to affect people throughout the country, which is why we're seeing a lot of Republican senators saying that this is going to affect too many of their constituents in a negative way, and why, again, it doesn't address health care. That's why I keep saying this is really a tax cut for the wealthy disguised as health care, with a little side of health care. And the reality is what we're doing is taking away health care from people with this bill, which is not what we should be doing as a country. So I agree with you. The cuts on Medicaid, I think, are unconscionable, and I think they affect people across the spectrum, and that's why they're a really bad idea.
La Plata, Maryland, Republican line. Randy, go ahead.
Hey, two comments. One, I don't hear the outrage about the age with the health care. We should. I'm older. I'm 56. I should pay more for health care. We use it more. We don't have a problem with charging the young kids a lot more money for their automobile insurance because the risk is high. So I don't see the difference there. And so I'd like to hear your comment on that one.
Sure. I think it's Randy, right? I think the thing that I'm trying to express is what we're seeing from the CBO score is people who don't have the money then to afford the insurance are going to have drop coverage. And that's the problem you're going to have. So if you're charging people who are older Americans more for that insurance and they don't have the ability to pay for it, at least with the Affordable Care Act, there are subsidies to help them get this done. What the CBO score is saying is these people now are not going to have health insurance, which means you and I and everybody else are going to pay through that if they have to go to the emergency room or if they have to go to the hospital. And that's not a real healthcare solution. That's going back to the old days of healthcare crisis. So I just don't think it's fair to say that someone who has worked their entire life, paid into our various systems in government, paid their taxes, and now they're older and they actually need healthcare, but they can't afford to. Too bad, so sad, quite honestly, isn't a rallying cry for healthcare in this country.
New Orleans, independent line. Brian, you're next.
Hi, sir. Good morning, Mr. Pocan. Thank you for your fight. I'm in Louisiana. We have a lot of the same issues. Republican governor, and last as far as health care. And like you were right about the expansion, there was a fight with that. So I want to thank you and your delegates in your state, because I follow the politics in your state. And, I mean, y'all are on the front lines of this thing. And I'm glad that y'all are fighting for the unions, people who work. And I just want to call and thank you.
Well, Brian, thank you. I'll tell you, my attitude is we should be talking about what people talk about at their dinner tables. Where I grew up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, we had a lot of people who made cars when I grew up. Now no one makes cars anymore. We've got to make sure that we're protecting the jobs that we have here in the United States, making sure that people have good paying jobs, and address the issues, again, at that kitchen table. Can they afford their mortgage? Can they send their kids to college? Can they take a family vacation that year? And where I grew up was maybe one little middle-class luxury. Did you get a camper or a snowmobile? That's what most people talk about. And I think when you look at the health care proposal, where it's a tax cut for the really wealthy, or you look at this budget that was introduced this morning by Donald Trump, where he's going to cut programs that affect real people, working people across the country by 10, 20, 30%. EPA, that's our clean air and water. We saw what happened in Flint, Michigan. We've got to fight for the middle class at every possible turn, and that's what I try to do when I'm in Congress. The special interests have plenty of lobbyists in this town. What we don't have are enough people speaking out on behalf of the middle class, and I think that's why we're elected. Unfortunately, I don't think everyone has that attitude, but thank you, Brian.
The budget is out, as you mentioned. What do you think about this higher shift towards defense, Veterans Affairs, Homeland Security, and to pay for that, these cuts to other programs?
Well, there's a lot of bad in that budget that was just reduced this morning. I serve on the Appropriations Committee, so I'm going to hopefully have a chance to have a little more in-depth dive in a lot of these issues. But you're cutting Pell Grants by $4 billion. That helps low-income folks who are bright enough and talented enough to go to college now may not be able to when you have less dollars. I got Pell Grants. I grew up in a lower middle-class family, so I'm going to fight as hard as I can to make sure that we're supporting programs like that. $6 billion to NIH. Congress, in a bipartisan way, put additional money in to help finding those medical cures that save lives, and now they want to cut $6 billion. They're cutting programs like Meals on Wheels. I've gone and helped deliver meals to seniors and other people who can't get out of their homes. That'd be a devastating cut to people like that. My mom's 88. She barely is able to leave the house, certainly can't drive or do anything like that. That's people across the country. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting. I mean, what did Big Bird ever do to this administration? I don't know. But these are the sort of things that real people are impacted by. But then we're going to have money to build a wall. And now we seem to have changed that we're paying for that, according to what I'm seeing being released by the budget. Or the fact that now we're going to take more money and put it into some of the other defense and other programs that are all coming out of programs that help real people. That, in the end, I think is a big mistake. Luckily, Congress can still impact this budget, but it shows, I think, the real disconnect in the campaign trail. It was promised to people, working families in Wisconsin, where President Trump won by 22,000 votes, and now they're getting a budget in health care that's showing them they're on the side of the road, and we're keeping the fast-track lanes for the wealthiest. I just think it's a terrible proposal, and I'm really looking forward to having this debate in Congress.
Even with Republicans in charge, is it safe to say the numbers that even the president would like to see won't be the final numbers as far as the budget is concerned?
Well, there's going to be a little bit of a difficulty because some Republicans really want to see the additional funds going to things like defense. In fact, some have argued for even more money going into defense. But the only way you can do it, if you're not willing to talk about revenue, is to cutting programs. It's like an upside-down pyramid. If you put more up here, there's going to be less available for everything else. If you're cutting the EPA almost 30%, that's things like clean air and clean water. Look at Flint, Michigan. I've been to Flint, Michigan. That's what happens when you don't have government in check around basic necessities. I think everyone thinks their tax dollars should protect things like air and water, and yet we're cutting those programs with devastating cuts. And I'm seeing that in Department of Labor, agriculture. A state like Wisconsin, that's a big, important part of our economy. These are not the promises that were made on the campaign trail, and I think we're seeing certain people benefit, and it's a very few people that are going to benefit out of the proposals in the budget.
Mark Pocan from Wisconsin, Democrat, joining us. Next call is from Corryton, Tennessee. Democrats line, Evelyn. Hi.
Good morning. I just wanted to say that this bill that they're trying to get through, I think is based on age instead of income, and that way, people that are in low income bracket, they don't pay that much. They don't pay that much taxes, and it causes them to have a lot of poor people that don't work or anything. They have to pay. The people that work for low income, they have to pay more, and I'm 90 years old, and I'm worried about what's going to happen to me because I'm on Medicare and I have a lot of health issues, and I know they're going to try to do away with the Medicaid, but I'm not on that or anything, and a lot of children, poor children and poor people depend on that Medicaid, and they need preventive care instead of just having to wait until they get some dreadful disease and it's too late to do anything about it.
Okay, thanks, Evelyn.
Yeah, Evelyn, I agree. I mean, first, congratulations on being 90. My mom just turned 88, and I know the health concerns she's going through and what chunk of the limited money that she has is going to things like medications and others. And my additional worry is that while right now Medicaid's on the table, the Republicans in Congress have put plans to voucherize Medicare out previously, multiple years. We know this is where they want to go. And then that will affect you and my mother and other people who are on Medicare, which is, I think, one of the programs that's most well received in this country, that makes sure that you have access to health care after paying into that program your entire life. So there are plenty of concerns on that front we should still have. But you're right. If we don't make sure that people have the preventive care and other things up front, and then you get something that is a serious disease, you can go bankrupt. That was the old days, and I thought we moved past that. And unfortunately, this is taking us back in the wrong direction.
From Clinton Township, Michigan, Republican line. Lorraine, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the show. I have two questions. One, I have friends that are lower middle class, and their premiums have gone up horribly, and their deductible is like $7,000. And when I was a child, if you lived to be 50, that was an old age. I'm 71, and I think there is a time when maybe we start cutting back on the care for the elderly, keep them comfortable, let them know there is a life after death, and take the money for the children and lower the premiums and the cost for the middle class. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Lorraine, first of all, one of the things I think it's important to remember, I've had a small business for 29 years, so when I pay for my employees' health care, I often got 20% spikes plus every single year. When the Affordable Care Act was passed, we watched that increase in health care costs really level off. And until the last year, partially because of some of these poison pills that were put in the ACA, like the risk corridors and other things, we did see a spike just come for the first time. But we got to remember, those costs leveled off for the last 6 or so years previous to the spike. I'm afraid that this proposal is going to go exactly back to having big 20, 30, 40% plus spikes because that's what we're finding I think is going to happen if this plan were actually to become law. So the only thing I think I disagree is I don't think that someone who's paid in their entire life for these programs should suddenly not have things when you're an older American or have to pay that much more as being proposed by this bill, because you simply, if you don't have money, you still need health care, and you shouldn't be forced out of having health care. And I think that would be a mistake if we went in that direction.
Let's hear from Judy, Idaho Falls, Idaho, Independent Line.
Thank you. I would like to back off to the really big picture, which is that health care is not an appropriate area for free market forces. You can't shop for an MRI when you have a broken leg. When the paramedics pick you up after a car accident, they take you to a hospital and you're stuck there. And also, the person consuming the health care is not the one paying for the health care and doesn't even know how much it costs. So all this talk about free market forces are not applicable because there's no chance to shop for anything. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Judy, the thing I would add to this is, one of the things we should be able to do is negotiate for prescription drugs that weren't allowed, because again, when you have volume purchasing power, we could bring the cost of prescription drugs down, and yet again, we're not seeing that in the current proposal. It should have been part of the original proposal, but wasn't allowed to, again, unfortunately, by the Republicans. But this is an area that I think, again, crosses all party lines. We pay more for prescription drugs in this country than almost any other country for the exact same drugs, and that's just not right. And I think that we could work on the free market a little through negotiating through bigger buys and lowering the cost of drugs.
Our guest serves on the Appropriations Committee, including the subcommittees on Labor, Health, and Human Services and Education, as well as Agriculture. We have a story from the Baraboo News Republic, awesome. And it talks to you. And you said, the headline says that you said that there's more to come when it comes to investigations into Russia. What do you know that we don't?
I think there's a lot more coming out on Russia. So first of all, what we know originally was that Russia clearly, based on 17 intelligence agencies, said that they intended to and succeeded in interfering with our elections. Multiple fronts. A lot of it's been made public, but very clearly what's been made public is we know they intended to. They intended to elect Donald Trump president, and they succeeded, and now they're off in Europe trying to do the same thing in some other countries.